Hello and welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, I got to tell you that I have literally just met my guest and I am eager to speak with him. He's with Blaze Media. His name is Auron MacIntyre. He's the author of the new book, The Total State: How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. Also, I want to speak to him about a column that he's written, but I think it's going to be fascinating to get his perspective as to this coalition of leftists, or what we believe to be a coalition of leftists. And it seems like, it's kind of impossible to defeat them. But I think this guy has some answers. So I look forward to speaking with him. Auron, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. It's a privilege to have you on. And I apologize for all the stuff that has happened behind the scenes that no one will talk about unless I talk about. So anyway, I appreciate you joining us. Before we get to your book, let me talk to you about this article of yours that I read. And I found it fascinating because I feel like you have your finger on the pulse. The article was entitled, I saw it on the Blaze, The Total State: How Liberal Democracies. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's the name of your book. Hate binds a bizarre coalition of contradictory leftist forces. But get his book, The Total State: How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. But you start off by saying this: before you enter a battle, it is best to understand the kind of monster you're fighting. With its use of mob violence, censorship, propaganda, and even criminal prosecution, it can be easy to conceive of the left as a unified tyrannical colossus. Not so. While a thin veneer of vindictive Marxist rhetoric is smeared across the coalition to create the appearance of a solid front, progressives in reality are a snarling mass of contradictory interests unified by their hate for America. I love this, Auron, simply because I look at what we've seen transpire recently on these college campuses. I've looked at even blacks that have at one point in time that were more socially conservative just seem to abandon their value system when it comes to this stuff. And all of it seems to be geared towards a hate for America, which is hard for me to understand. Help us to put this into perspective.
Well, like you said, we look at what's happening, and normally a lot of us will say, oh, the left, they have this unifying Marxist ideology. They have this monolithic control of all of these things. We talk about the deep state, which is real and something that's important, but we often pretend like the left is like some grandmaster chess player. It's got all of its moves mapped out. It's got one set of interests, and we're just fighting this giant Goliath. But actually what's happening is that the left is a collection of vindictive, power-hungry people who really just hate the United States. And while that binds them together for a minute so that they can attack us, they actually often hate each other just as much as they hate us, which is why you see the civil war erupting on college campuses between different factions of the left. Some are pro-Israel, some are pro-Palestine. They're all on the left. They're all radical leftists on college campuses, but they are more than willing to attack each other the minute that they don't have the unifying enemy of kind of middle America, the heartland of America. And so what I think is important for conservatives to understand is that we're not just facing, one unified group that's always coming up at us with some master strategy. These people are just as capable of destroying each other if you can let them, if you can exacerbate some of those critical contradictions. Look, there's a reason that you have radical traditional Muslims standing next to people who are trying to force puberty blockers on 8-year-olds. Normally, these people would be trying to kill each other, and often in other countries, they literally do.
Right.
And so we need to understand that there's not actually a natural coalition there. It's really just that hate that's binding them together.
This is such a good point. And then I think I've articulated this point just not as clearly as you. So I do really appreciate that. But often there is this, you talked about in this column. Again, I'm speaking with Auron MacIntyre. He's with Blaze Media. Check out his work. He also has a Substack, Auron MacIntyre, spelled AURON, MacIntyre, MacIntyre. So auronmacintyre.substack.com. You can check him out there as well. But it is weird to me. I look at again, going back to the college campuses, there's this veneer of all of these Marxists are teaming up against us, and it seems like it is so hard to defeat them. But I get frustrated because I felt the same way that you feel. Like what the left is good at, Auron, is creating victim groups because they're losing voters either through abortion, bad ideas, so on, etc. And so they have to keep creating these new victim groups that don't necessarily gel well together, except that they get them to hate America, essentially, or get them to hate Republicans and just say, you know what, Republicans are conservatives, white conservatives are, they're racist, they're bigots, xenophobes, all this kind of stuff. So, and they hate you, so we will fight for you. That seems to be their tactic, but ultimately, all these globalists will come for all of us. Am I wrong?
No, it's really comical the way this has happened. So obviously we know who they're explicitly against. They tell us over and over again. There's a reason that corporations and the educational institutions and even the U.S. Army at this point has said that whiteness is a terrible thing that you have to get rid of.
Crazy.
But on top of that, it's funny how they expand this idea of whiteness because, of course, Clarence Thomas is actually maybe probably white, and actually there's a multiracial whiteness we have to watch out. There's too many Hispanics who are voting white,
right.
And of course many people inside the leftist coalition are themselves white, but they want to make it clear that they're one of the good ones. They're going to punish all the bad whites and maybe even some of the minorities that are actually multiracial white. It's insane, right? Like I do think at the core there is a true like vile hatred of whites. I do think that does exist, but obviously they are willing to expand that to any other group that just loves America and wants to be a part of it. They identify them somehow as traitors to the cause of hating America. This is the way that they treat people, no matter the color of their skin. If you're pro-America, if you're for the idea of what America is, its traditions, if you love this land, they want to dismantle it. And that's where their power comes from, is gathering groups together that want to dismantle the institutions, the culture, the traditions that have defined America, that have been built by many generations of Americans. And so anybody who stands against that is going to obviously be a huge problem for them. But like we said, that is an unnatural coalition. These people do, at the end of the day, have very different interests, and they just happen to rally around this shared hatred. So that means there are opportunities where we can exploit that. We can know when to pick and choose our battles, where all these fault lines inside the leftist coalition, that radical woke vanguard versus kind of the establishment left and the different power politics that they have to engage in. Those are all things that we can go ahead and exacerbate and attack and pull apart. And I think that's really important as we look at the type of strategies that we want to employ when we oppose the left, because if we treat them as one unified group, then we end up missing the forest for the trees.
Okay, so Auron, we have 3 minutes left in this block, but here's a problem that I see with the Republican Party, with the conservative movement, if you will, even with the libertarian movement. I think you're absolutely correct. I don't think that we have the courage on the right, or even the knowledge. I don't. Reading your column again, I'm speaking to Auron MacIntyre of The Blaze, and I'm reading through his column, How Hate Binds a Bizarre Coalition of Contradictory Leftist Forces. Also, check out his book, The Total State. We'll get to that in the next block. How liberal democracies become tyrannies. I'm not convinced that most conservatives get it like you do. And for some of the ones that do get it, I'm not convinced that they have the courage to fight against the left. Hence, what we see in Washington, D.C. So there lies a bigger problem to dismantling this left-wing juggernaut that we perceive exists.
Yeah, one of the huge problems that we're facing right now is just obviously that the prestige system inside our country is oriented entirely to left-wing incentives. All of our Republican congressmen and senators show up to Washington, D.C., and what do they really want to be? Well, they really want to be Democrats, right? They really want to be praised by the New York Times. They really want to be told that they're champions of freedom. They want that nice pat on the head that Mitt Romney or the current speaker get. That's what they're looking for. They want that approval. And we need people who are willing to be unpopular. We need people who care about the people who sent them to Washington, who care about their communities, care about the people who are actually supposed to be represented by them, and not the prestige system that Washington is offering them. And that's pretty difficult because there are very few of those fighters available at the moment. But I am encouraged. We're seeing more and more of these people. I think we see promising guys like J.D. Vance. I think we're seeing those that are willing to go ahead and say, I don't care, write all the nasty articles you want, tell me I'm a bigot, tell me whatever, lie, do whatever you need to do. I'm here to represent the interests of the people in my area. They are the ones that matter, not getting nice articles in whatever newspaper. And that's a big shift.
We only have 30 seconds left in this block, but I think you're absolutely right. When you see the J.D. Vances of the world, and even the Marjorie Taylor Greens, and some of the young up and comers that are willing to fight, Mike Lee's of the world, and stuff like that, it seems like you disarm the left when you're not afraid of the arrows that they'll throw at you. 15 seconds to respond before the break.
No, absolutely. Thomas Massey is another one. We do have Thomas these people, Massey. Chip Roy. They are there. There's too few of them. We need more, but it is good to know that we're seeing more and more of them.
Absolutely. All right, we'll be back with more. Auron MacIntyre, my guest. Stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Before we get back to my guest, Auron MacIntyre of Blaze Media, I want to talk to you about wealth protection research. At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we hold sacred, and that's free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom that we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and our security. This is where wealth protection research steps in. They're armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They are defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silence. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election cycle. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free. All you have to do is text the word IDEAS to the number 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment does not think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. All right, now back to my guest, Auron MacIntyre of Blaze Media. He's out with a new book, The Total State: How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. He's also written a column, I think it was released just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Auron, Hate Binds a Bizarre Coalition of Contradictory Leftist Forces. And I really think, and we'll get to his book shortly, I really think this is an important column. I want you to read this column as well, because I do feel like the left, if we stand strong, and Auron, you correct me if I'm wrong, but if we stand strong, if we know what we stand for on the right, and maybe that's part of the problem, maybe too many people on the right don't know what we stand for. But if we stand up for our principles, I believe that eventually the left would cave, because I believe that we would split up their little groups, because there's no way all these groups of people agree with each other on every single thing. We're all human. They've got to agree with us on some things, Auron.
You know, Russell Kirk is a great thinker. He wrote The Conservative Mind, one of the foundational texts in the 1950s for what the conservative movement should be. And he talks about conservatism from Edmund Burke all the way up to today, all through the American thinkers. And the thing he points out that is critical, that I think most conservatives have lost, is he says that conservatism must be non-ideological. Conservatism is about conserving the people of America, the traditions of America, its folkways, its way of being, who we are as a nation. And ideology is an abstraction away from that. The left is all supposed to be ideology, right? It's all these different systems, these Marxist ideas, all these things, abstractions that are supposed to dismantle who Americans are. But we on the right should be about protecting the actual people, the real communities, the faith, the family, the things that truly matter. And so I think what helps us stand against the left, the things that help protect us from that ideological capture, are centering on the people, not some abstract condition. I mean, maybe free trade is great. Maybe, peace through strength is great. Maybe those things are valuable. but they're only valuable in that they protect the people and the way of
Right.
life in this country. And I think that if we can stand on that, that helps us to hold fast in the face of an ideological enemy that just wants to dismantle it.
Yeah, that's so that's so well said. You know, I was sitting in for the Officer Tatum last night, and this thought came to me, and I'd like to get your thought on it. But it seems like to me, when it comes to a lot of these the people on the left, including these what I'm calling these anti-Jewish, obviously pro-Hamas, at least in my opinion, protesters, I think they're almost as bad as the terrorists, since they're basically propagandists for them. But a lot of these voters, it seems to me, are seeking validation from big government, validation from their politicians, perhaps validations from their peers or people on social media. Whereas, at least typically, I'd like to believe that conservatives want freedom. Basically, just as you've explained, and we want the ability to be free to, we want the same traditions and all the things that bind us together as Americans. But it seems to me that the left is looking for validation that can only come from, quite frankly, in my opinion, the creator God.
I think all of us as human beings look up social hierarchies. That's just who we are as people. And so what's really important is who's at the top of those hierarchies. What do people see? Do they see these celebrities? Do they see, globalist NGO leaders? Do they see, politicians who are spewing a bunch of globalist propaganda? Or instead, are they looking to their pastor? Are they looking to their community leader? Are they looking to organic sources of authority that should sit atop a status hierarchy? I think that we should recognize that we're always looking for validation, but we should find it in strong sources of faith, sources of family, sources of local leadership. It matters who's in charge. I think, conservatives do need to understand that. Everyone does need someone to look up to. We are people who follow archetypes, who follow heroes. And what matters is that we're placing the right types of people into those positions, not pro athletes or musicians or actors, people who are completely empty and void of any real moral content, but people who are worthy of veneration because they've grounded themselves and bettered the communities that they're a part of.
Well said. Well said. Listen, Auron, I got to ask you: Are you able to stick with us one more block? Because at first I hardly have any questions. Now you're just opening up more questions in my mind. But I want to be respectful of your time.
No, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So
Sure.
let me just do this, because I really think it's important for the audience to hear this. And I think this is so important, because when we encounter the left, when we see everything that we see on our TV screens, it just feels so overwhelming. I mean, even I'm in this business. Obviously, Auron, you are, and you can get to the point where you just feel defeated, and just like, good Lord, man, if there were more people like us that would stand up and fight. And then I sit here and think that the average Americans must see what the left is doing, and they just feel like this is over. The country is just over. And I don't necessarily, or at least I don't want to believe that's true. And I feel like we can defeat the left. So I want to go back to your column for a little bit here before we get on to your book. And again, I'm speaking to Auron MacIntyre. Make sure you check out his Substack, auronmacintyre.substack.com. You spell his name Auron MacIntyre, MacIntyre. Go out and get his book, The Total State: How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. But you stay here. You talk about making this distinction. So let me go back. You say, while a thin veneer of vindictive Marxist rhetoric is smeared across the coalition to create the appearance of a solid front, speaking of the left, progressives in reality are a snarling mass of contradictory interests unified by their hate for America. This distinction is critical, as it radically shifts the tactics one can consider when engaging in combat. And make no mistake, we are in a fight for the future of our country. The Progressive Coalition is powerful, but contains many critical fault lines, and a proper understanding of this foe can help to strike decisive blows at critical moments. It is easy to become demoralized and paralyzed by inaction when you see your opponent as an omnipotent and omniscient Leviathan capable of crushing all oppositions, Conservatives and right-wingers need to realize the totality of the forces arrayed against them, but only with the goal of increasing urgency and gathering courage. So basically, we spoke on this briefly, but what would be a way in which the right conservatives of America could break through what appears to be this coalition of leftist or progressive forces, if you will?
Well, the good news is that in some ways it falls apart naturally. Like I said, we're already seeing on college campuses this civil war between these two factions. Look, Jewish donors and Jewish activists have been a big part of the left for a long time. It's a group that has voted very highly for the left. There's a over 70% voting rate for Democrats in most elections from that group. But what you're quickly seeing is that the establishment of those activists who are pro-Israel are now clashing with a new vanguard of woke leftists who come from the Palestinian side. And for a long time, the left has said, well, we need to go ahead and open up the borders. We need to make sure that more and more people from many places, including the Middle East, can come in who don't share a particular idea of how the United States should interact with Israel. And now they're seeing the fruits of this play out on college campuses. Many on the right have wanted to rush in and solve this problem for the left. Say, oh, we've got to shut this down. We've got to solve this problem. We've got to dive on this grenade. But no, let them fight it out. Look, they should realize that there is a cost for voting for the left. These people are not your friends, and you're seeing the natural consequences play themselves out on leftist campuses. Let them fight it out. Let them feel the pain of the decisions they're making, and let that inform the way that they support people going forward.
I absolutely love that. Again, I'm speaking to Auron MacIntyre of The Blaze. I'm in total agreement with this. I'm like, I want everybody to see what's happening on these college campuses, and I don't give a flip if they burn them down. Let everybody experience the pain that have sided with these people on the left. Let all of them see it. Anyway, you're listening to The Carl Jackson Show. I'll be back with my guest, Auron MacIntyre of The Blaze. All right, guys, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, I am joined by my guest, Auron MacIntyre of The Blaze. Go out and get his new book, The Total State, How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. We will be getting into that in this block. Before we get started, I do want to talk to you about my friends at mypillow.com. Right now, there is a great deal going on, a $25 extravaganza. You know, cancel culture has gone after Mike Lindell and MyPillow. But Mike he's navigating around this by extending an offer directly to my listeners. $25 extravaganza. You can go to mypillow.com. I mean, everything is on sale. Mother's Day is Sunday, fellas. So I don't know what you're waiting for. Mypillow.com. Promo code Carl, C-A-R-L. I don't spell it like the Marxists. So C-A-R-L. You can get sandals. You can get the My Pillows. He's got a 6-pack of towel sets, a brand new pack of dish towel sets. Plus the new My Pillow with the Giza fabric, all of that and more, just $25. He's got a strong group of employees, hundreds of new products, American-made products, American jobs. MyPillow.com, promo code Carl, or if you prefer to give them a call, you can do that at 800-858-0263. Again, that number, 800-858-0263, promo code Carl. All right, let's get back to my guest. Again, Auron MacIntyre of The Blaze. He's out with a new book, The Total State, How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. I'm also encouraging you. And by the way, I got to be honest with you. I am meeting Auron for the first time. I speed read one of his columns this morning, and that's the column that we've been talking about. I got to tell you, Auron, I look forward to reading more of your stuff. I really do. I always I used to write. I hope to get back into writing. My time has been absolutely insane. But I can, when somebody can take a complicated issue and make it plain and digestible, you know they're a good writer. I've run into a couple of those in the last couple of weeks. You're one of them. I love how E.J. Antoni actually is another. He does it for the Heritage Foundation when it comes to the economy. I can read his stuff and it's so profound, but so simple. Where a person like me, who I like to think that I'm smart, but at the same token, there's some things that I just don't understand, and I need them explained to me. You have a gift, from what I've read, of being able to make the complex simple. And I really appreciate that. You can tell when a writer is really good when they're able to do that. So so good job, at least based upon the columns that I've read, or this column, Auron. If I see a column that disappoints me, I'll be sure and let you know. But all right, let's get to your book, The Total State: How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. Why don't you just talk to us about the book real briefly here?
Sure. I mean, like a lot of people watching this, probably, I grew up as a talk radio conservative, right? Standard issue GOP voter. I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and I took my civics classes, and I heard about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the separation of powers and how all this stuff was going to protect us when tyranny came, right? Like, you would never get, locked in your home. They would never be able to shut down the churches because all of this government was restricted by these important documents that were always going to be there for us. And then obviously 2020 happened. I was working as a local political journalist at the time, and it just shattered all of my understanding of what was going on. And so I needed to understand, like, okay, if this is not how power really works, like when the test has come, wow, and this is not going, then I need to understand this. And so really The Total State is a book about my intellectual journey. I looked at a lot of political theory from people who are outside of the kind of the mainstream, and I found out that there's actually a long tradition of right-wing political thought that kind of explain how power really works and what really happened there. And so I kind of learned that actually the way that our government has grown, the way that abstract, complex, massive bureaucracies have taken over the functions of many of the things in our society, things like the deep state. People recognize that now, right? That so much of the power of the government has actually been installed into unelected parts of the executive branch, but that other parts of the power of our government have actually been shifted into the private sector, media, other places that aren't actually governed by the Constitution. This is what has allowed a tyranny, a soft tyranny, to kind of create itself, to build around the protections that were created by the founders in the Constitution. And because we weren't vigilant about how that power distributed itself and the way that this alternative government basically grew around the protections of the Constitution, we're now suffering the consequences because we can see the way that they've enforced tyrannical power, even though we're supposed to be limiting it through popular sovereignty.
Yeah, honestly, going back to the lockdowns, I think that's the last column that I read right after the lockdowns began. It was like 10 things you shouldn't do or something like that. And I mean, at the time, I was like, what are we doing? This makes no sense to me. I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian, Auron, and I got to tell you right away, my spidey senses, perked up when even Trump was talking about shutting down the economy. I'm like, are you crazy? What are you doing? This is insane. I instinctively knew that the left would take advantage of it. To what degree, I did not know. But also what I didn't know and what I didn't realize were how many people would just kind of, the Constitution, it seems like, became an afterthought. And sadly, to many people that I believed would be like, no, this isn't happening. How do we, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, these are just pieces of paper if we don't have a moral, if you will, population that are willing to adhere to them. How do we get past that? Because I'm not even as concerned about the left as I am those on the right.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. The founding fathers were very clear about what the Constitution was. Like you said, it wasn't some magical piece of political technology that solved all of our problems in perpetuity. There's nothing, just specifically scientific about the way that power is broken up in the Constitution that solves all of our problems of big government. The only thing that actually restricts the power of government at the end of the day is other opposing social forces, the power of the family, the power of the church, the power of the community, the power of your merchant guild, the power of your governor, the federalism. These things push back naturally because they're organic coalitions of people who care about each other, trust each other, work together. And if you don't have that, if you've become this impersonal, atomized, isolated person who doesn't take that role seriously and doesn't participate in those communities, then when tyranny comes, all the protections are just paper. Like you said, they just get blown through. There's no real animating tradition or ethos behind them, and they just get bowled down by raw power, by centralized government, by massive bureaucracies, corporations, non-government institutions that are global, that take over the role of your government that is supposed to be sovereign. And we have to get back to the point where we are the ones who are actively engaged in this. And that requires, like you said, a virtuous population. The founders were very clear about who the Constitution is for. And when we don't have one of those, when we don't have a population that is acting in communities and inculcating virtue in those communities, we simply can't be ruled by the Constitution, and we will be ruled by something else. And that's very clearly what has been happening these last few years.
Well said. We have a couple of minutes left in this block. I got to be honest with you, Auron. I'm one of my concerns is that I don't know who to blame. I don't know if I should blame the church. I don't know, but I was blaming the church a lot, just getting frustrated as a Christian. But I have to look at the voters. I'll look at the people that we send to Washington, D.C. We always talk about, even those of us on the right, these bureaucracies and stuff like that. And then and then when it comes to keeping our people accountable in Washington, D.C., like we don't accomplish anything. I mean, we have this deep state, and then we have Republicans that pass this FISA, this bill to renew FISA. And I'm like, what I mean, are we insane? Are you concerned at all about just how it seems to me the American population has been dumbed down to such a degree? I'm not even convinced, sadly, that we want freedom anymore.
Well, freedom is really, I think liberty is the best word. And
Okay.
Liberty is a product of virtue. You get liberty because you have a ordered society that creates virtue, and then virtue allows for the opportunity of liberty. Liberty is not just doing whatever you want to do. It's the pursuit of the good life in the context of a shared moral vision in a community.
That's good.
You don't have liberty because you're doing heroin. You have liberty because you're able to be a good father and a good husband and a good Christian, a good member of your church. You have the liberty to be a virtuous person in that context. And if we don't have those things, then we can't have liberty. And the big problem that we've run into is that we have destroyed all of those things, right? You don't need a family. You don't need a church. You don't need these communities. And so is it the individual's fault? Well, in some sense, yes, but they also don't have those structures that allow them. And I think there's an interplay between what power wants and what the large government wants. And part of that is the destruction of the family, the destruction of the church, the destruction of those social spheres that would create virtue and enable liberty so they can centralize more and more power.
Good stuff. The left is bound by their hatred. We can break up these coalition forces, but we've got to conserve our principles, our values, our traditions. Auron MacIntyre of The Blaze, you've been a wonderful guest. I really appreciate you. Go out and get the book, The Total State, How Liberal Democracies Become Tyrannies. You're listening to The Carl Jackson Show. Stay tuned. I'm going to talk about Joe Biden selling out Israel.